Love life. This is Freshly Pressed, looking at the news stories making the headlines across the country. The WhatsApp number to send your messages to be a part of the conversation, of course, is 0144899981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. We're streaming live on YouTube as well. It's Smooth981 FM Lagos. So just search for Smooth981. You can catch the live stream and post a comment on there as well. Our analysts this morning, Mr. C and Chibuzor. Good morning.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Mr. C. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning, Zibby.
We're trying. All right, let's start off with the Daily Trust. The Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria has given conditions that the federal government must fulfill before the removal of petrol subsidy. Now, he says the federal government must be transparent in telling the public how much is being spent on subsidy and the areas that the money realized from subsidy removal would be deployed to.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So as we wind down to scheduled and proposed end of the fuel subsidy regime, more bodies, more individuals are keen in and bringing in opinions. Now, the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria has said that before the subsidy program is ended, that the federal government should provide details of how much is spent on subsidy and the areas to which the money realized from the end of the subsidy removal will be deployed to. Now, I'm not always a fan of government, but with regards to the request of the Chartered Institute of Taxation, the government has provided this information on a number of occasions. They told us how much they're spending on the subsidy program, and it remains to be seen whether that figure is actually correct and factual, but they have given a figure, and they have indicated some areas of the economy to which the subsidy removal program gains will be deployed to. Now, whether in fact that will actually happen is a different conversation. However, we're set for a very interesting period of time because we have an incoming administration that may or may not immediately sanction the subsidy removal. Now, we must remember that we still don't have an idea of how this subsidy removal will be done. Is it at once or is it going to be in phases? Now, if it is going to be at once, then that $800 million World Bank loan will be inadequate because it's 5,000 naira for 10 million vulnerable Nigerian families. That's not going to scratch the surface. But if you're going to phase it out, over what period of time? And what are we looking at? Already, I dare say that the subsidy removal, in a sense, has started because in the past 8 to 10 months, we moved from 165 naira per liter to 185 naira per liter. So it's already started. When it's going to end, we don't know. Now, it will be instructive that the incoming administration also provides clarity on the figures it inherits once it gets into office, because sometimes the figures will change. So once they get into office, they should tell us how much officially is being spent on the fuel subsidy, and then confirm that what the previous administration or the outgoing administration has said with regards to the deployment of the gains will actually be sustained.
All right. Well, let us know what your thoughts are. Chibuzor, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I do. So, yes, I think Mr. C has hit the crux of the issue. The government has said a lot about, how much is being spent on subsidy, what they want to do with the funds. But I think, although most of the times there's been, for me, the challenge with that is that a lot of it has been generic. There's no specific. So it's like, we're going to build roads, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. At some point, obviously, when we get to that point, it would be nice to see specifics so that it's like, what's the word? Some of the proceeds that have been sent back from other countries, we need to have specific projects tied to what we're going to do with the subsidy removal. My only challenge and my major challenge and my crux with the subsidy issue is subsidies are being paid based on consumption and usage and consumption by vehicles and local consumption. I'm still struggling for anybody to give us a number of how much we're actually consuming in terms of how much petroleum are we actually paying for and how that has changed over the years. It's been a very interesting number. I remember during the lockdown, that was one of the big issues that during the lockdown, we were spending a chunk. In fact, we had an increased spend on subsidies. And yes, there might be ways to explain some of this, but it's good to see, even from a data perspective, it allows us to plan going forward on how much we need, how much even on Forex that we need to spend on this. Because as long as those numbers are not clear, it gives an idea that, people are playing hard and fast with numbers and the money.
All right, let's go on to the next headline. This one comes from Daily Trust. Minister of Foreign Affairs Geoffrey Onyema has disclosed that the federal government would begin the evacuation of stranded Nigerians in Sudan within the next 2 days. Now, the fighting in Sudan is been ongoing for well over a week now, and he says this will happen in the coming days.
Okay. This is very interesting, and Zibby and Mr. Sino, I'm smiling about this. But so, like I said, the fighting has been on for a while now. Started, I think, last week, Friday. That's before the previous week, upper week's Friday. So we're talking about 9 days, 10 days now of fighting. I don't know at the moment. Some of the other countries, like the US, some of the other first world countries are actually struggling to get their citizens out of Khartoum, particularly, and Sudan in general. And the reason for that is some of the initial fighting was around the airport. So a lot of the aircrafts were destroyed. The airport was basically under siege. So it was even challenging for a lot of people to be moved out. I think what is happening is that a lot of people are trying to use the waterways. For Nigerians in Sudan, and I had a very interesting discussion with somebody from one of the Nigerian embassies or consuls. And one of the interesting things that came up was that it's a bit challenging for the embassies to even know how many Nigerians are in the country, because typically, and he pointed out, because I've been out for a while, he pointed out even by my particular case that when you come into a foreign country, for instance, you're supposed to go to the embassy and register if you're going to have extended stay, so that they know that you are there. So apart from the fact that he knows me and he knows I've been around, that basically there's no idea of how many Nigerians there are. So for instance, in Kenya, I think he said they had about 4,000 Nigerians registered that the embassy knows about that in Kenya. But the reality is that you have over 10,000 or more Nigerians there. So it's a bit challenging when you have the Nigerian government has to do these evacuations, because you really cannot plan for the numbers that you are going to have to deal with. And there are a lot of guys that will fall through the cracks, and you probably see them on Al Jazeera or BBC complaining that they've been abandoned. But that's the reality. A lot of guys are coming in through various channels and means. And so it's hard to keep track of this. But as per capacity to get these guys out, and they need to get these people out of Sudan as quickly as possible, that can't be overstated. I think we can actually do better, because while the government has said that they didn't expect it to be extended over a period this long, and to be truthful, a lot of people did not expect it to quickly blow up into what has happened now. So that's why even the first world countries are just evacuating their people now. So while I typically like to bash the Nigerian government and our embassies and whatever, in this instance, I'm just hoping that they get into their game and get out the Nigerians that need to be gotten out of that place quickly, because especially in Khartoum, there's already a shortage of water, shortage of basic things, and obviously general safety for everybody who's in Khartoum, talk less of if you're a Nigerian or somebody who is not from that space. So they need to get the people out, and we're hoping that in the next 2 days they'll be able to put their promise into action and get the people out. They're saying they have about 5,500 Nigerians. I do hope that is a reasonable number, an accurate number, but I doubt it, given my little experience even here. I doubt that 5,500 is a real number.
Okay, so thank you, Chibuzor. Let me chip in right on the back of what you said. Now, I'm aware that I think just yesterday, the American embassy was successfully evacuated from a runway or a landing strip within the embassy compound, because the airport in Khartoum is still closed.
Yes.
Now, the Nigerian government and the American government has been unable to evacuate private American citizens, and they've continued to advise them to stay safe, send their details, and they can work out a plan. Now, this is a country that is organized. This is a country that plans well. This is a country that has the resources from a military perspective, from an economic perspective. How is the Nigerian government supposed to achieve all of this?
Let's go on some messages from WhatsApp. Dami says almost every Nigerian community abroad has a visible and active association. Our diplomats need to do more to engage with Nigerians abroad and provide value for their positions.
It's not that easy, Dami. A lot of the Nigerians in a lot of African countries are really undocumented. So there's always the fear that if they do expose their stays within the country, that they could get deported out. Although typically the Nigerian embassies are not under any obligation unless you are involved in criminal activity to expose you. All they will do is they will warn you about the likelihood of you getting picked up and all the things you could go through. So, but there's that fear. And like I said, I had an extensive discussion with somebody from one of the embassies yesterday, and that was the reality. And from experience here, it's basic reality. Most of the Nigerians will not pop.
Ben from Ago Palace says the embassy should have access to entry and exit immigration databases of its citizens in the host country to help them know the most likely number of citizens in that country.
It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work that. There's no obligation for the countries to share with Nigeria, with the Nigerian embassies.
And Cisco says, why not immediately? Why next 2 days? God forbid that Nigerians might be killed before that day, but God forbid that. Let's take a quick break and we'll continue the conversation on the other side. This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1.
It's easier said than done. Easier said than done. Sorry, are we off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I met a Nigerian who had come over here to Sudan, South Sudan from Mozambique.
Wow.
He had been in Mozambique. In fact, he had, the Igbo apprenticeship stuff. So he had a master in Mozambique who had served for 7 years. Apparently, the guy didn't settle in properly. So instead of my guy to pack up and, go back to Nigeria to restart, my guy like, you know what? Since I've been here, let me find somewhere else. And he hopped into South Sudan. I'm sure that guy came into the borders. He didn't come in through any official immigration route. I've met several Nigerians who are married to Ugandans, Rwandese who are here, who own businesses. I'm sure a lot of them might either have papers from somewhere else they've gotten, or they don't have proper documents. A lot of them are probably overstayed their visits. So, you have those kind of things. So it's easier said than done. It's easy to sit down for the comfort of living.
And then if they get evacuated, it's harder for them to come back into the country.
So a lot of them will probably want to wait out and see, hope that stuff doesn't get bad, so that they can hold on to their businesses and their money.
All right, we're going on. You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Our analysts this morning, Mr. C and Chibuzor. Once again, the WhatsApp number to be a part of the conversation, 0809 440 981. And you can also tweet at Smooth 981. We're also streaming live. It's up on YouTube. Just search for Smooth 981. You can catch the live stream and post a comment as well. The next story comes from Punch. The federal government has commenced the payment of withheld salaries of teachers who benefited from the elongation of service tenure. This was extended by President Buhari to teachers under the employment of the federal government.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So on World Teachers Day in 2020, which was on the 5th of October, the president announced the elongation of the retirement age for teachers from 60 to 65 years, and then announced a new salary scale with accompanying allowances. Now, teachers who were to benefit from this new arrangement started then all of a sudden from 2021 up until now, their salaries, the new salaries and the allowances were withheld. We now get news that the federal government has started paying the outstanding salaries and allowances. Now, the first thing that's disturbing thing that crosses my mind is, for 2 years, you were owing people who had gone to work, who had put in the work. How are they supposed to survive? It's not that there was no allocation for the money, but somehow the money just sat down somewhere, nothing happened. Now the money is coming out. Imagine the amount of loans these people would have taken to survive. It would not be shocking to hear that in the process, some people had died because they couldn't basically afford to live. Now the money has come out. We don't get an idea or quantum of the amount of money involved. It's coming too close to the end of this administration, and it begs the all-important question: where is this money? Can this salary scale be sustained such that when the new administration comes in, these teachers, we don't then hear that the teachers are going on a strike because the new salary structure that was implemented and approved by the federal government is no longer being sustained or maintained? So these are very pertinent questions. Two, how many teachers are benefiting from this arrangement? Is there no number? What is Nigeria's monthly exposure with regards to this new salary scale and the peculiar allowances? How much are the salaries? How much are the allowances? These are the sort of details Nigerians need to know. And it's a shame that the journalist who broke this story or who covered this story failed to get us the details. Government cannot continue to be run in secrecy. Everything be transparent. It has to be open. Now, for all we know, this will be another drink bite. It's hard to say. I'm not saying that teachers do not deserve their wages, and I don't subscribe to that school of thought that the teachers reward in heaven. The teachers should enjoy their lives here because they also have families, they also have goals, they also have aspirations. However, that having been said, we need to be transparent with regards to how government money is spent because it is the commonwealth of every single Nigerian.
Abbas says, good one, Chibuzor. Over time, the government has done well in evacuating people from troubled areas. We just hope situations in Sudan will improve and they will be able to do this successfully as well. Tony says, Nigeria has one of the major gas deposits in the world. Why is the NNPCL not telling Nigerians how much the country generates from gas exports? Subsidy removal seems like the smokescreen that takes the flashlight away from the gas export industry, and this shouldn't be so. Now, speaking about subsidies from Vanguard, Dr. Tunde Adeoye, an economist, has advised the incoming administration to remove fuel subsidies in phases in order to reduce the severe impacts on Nigeria.
So 2023 looks like going to be the start of some challenging periods for the Nigerian government, or for the Nigerian people to be exact. One of the challenges that would come, obviously, what we're talking a lot about these days is actually subsidy removal, but we have other things that that possibly will be hitting the population and the people of Nigeria. Obviously, we have the discrepancy between the parallel rate and the official rate for our currency, and we also have the issues with power pricing. Now, expectedly, the incoming government is going to try and tackle all three issues, and we still wait to see how they will tackle it and how they expect to tackle it. If you remove all three at the same time, it's going to have a major impact on the population at the same time. So I'm one of people that subscribes to a layered or phased removal of subsidies because I think over a period of time, it can at least seem to be organic to Nigerians when over a period of time, they're increasing their costs, people will adjust faster. Or like when you have to yank out, it's almost like cold turkey treatment, which is going to have a major impact on everything. Because remember, the way our markets work in Nigeria is quite interesting. Everybody has whenever governments talk about subsidy, they try to talk it down and say, oh, it's only affecting a part of society, the guys who have big cars and expensive cars on the road, guys who are driving. But I always remind them that that's far from the reality. Because we have power issues in this country, everybody, the price of fuel impacts everybody because everybody has their small generators, their mid-sized generators that run on fuel. Especially in the last 1-2 years when diesel, at the start of the Ukraine-Russian crisis, where the price of diesel has jumped from 200 to over 800 or wherever it is now. A lot of people who used to have big diesel generators have actually scaled down their use of those generators and tried to use petroleum. So it has a wide-ranging expense because even the woman who is grinding pepper in the market has a small generator who is going to power that. The guy who is barbing your hair is going to do that. So you are going to expect to see all the attendant cost increases across board. Now, if you phase that into our over 22% inflation rate and add those price increases that will come from that and the other attendant increases that will come if you try and merge both currency currency, both our parallel and official currency rates, and even if you try and price a lot of your power expense, you can imagine how the eternal increase in cost on all the goods and services that will happen across the economy and impact on inflation and the standard and cost of living for the average Nigerian. So the government, the government coming in and the outgoing government, obviously the current government has passed on that based on to the outgoing government and that bucket and the handover notes with them. They have to think about how well they want to do it, and because they're going to have to tackle the crisis not only on an economic point, but also on a political and social point, because it's going to have a lot of attendant impact. So, yes, I am one for phasing it, like Mr. Dewey has said. He's also made some very interesting points about it being a scam and about how it goes into a few pockets. And it speaks to what Mr. C has spoken to earlier about transparency in how this entire process happens. There's a lot of murky things that happen within and it's not just about the oil or petroleum sector. It's about the way we run government. Nigerians need to get to the point in Nigeria where a lot of these transactions are transparent, from knowing how many people we're actually paying subsidy for, who's receiving what, and what they are receiving these services for. Until then, there will be a lot of distrust between the government and the populace, even when they bring out issues like removal of subsidy that they claim would help Nigeria to to move to where it needs to go to. So we still remain to see what happens, but I'm also of the view that it will be good to actually phase it. But hey, the guys who have the numbers and who are in charge will have to make that call.
All right, let's go on to some messages that we've got coming through on WhatsApp. This one's from Olumide. He says, let's say after complete subsidy removal, the cost is 750 naira per litre. Does anyone think Nigerians can survive that? People transport themselves with petrol. Small businesses power themselves with petrol as well. That one element increases and everything increases. I would suggest rather than subsidy removal, put systems in place to stop all the shenanigans taking place around this subsidy. When hunger and suffering push people to the limit, something will crack. There are many examples, but Sri Lanka serves as a case study. Emeka says, there's been recent complaints that there's been a low turnout of people registering for NCE for teachers training. How will people register when salaries are being owed for 2 years? I won't even advise my worst enemy to be a primary or secondary school teacher in any public school in the country. Okay, let's go on to our next headline. This one comes from Premium Times. SERAP, which is a Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, has asked the president to commence an investigation into the alleged missing 149 million barrels of crude oil.
Thank you. Thank you, Zibby. So in 2019, the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, in conjunction with the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, discovered or alleged that 149 million barrels of crude oil were lifted and there's no documentation and no receipt of money. That is the allegation, and this has been since 2019. Now, a few weeks to the end of this administration, SERAP now gives the president a 7-day ultimatum to commence the investigation of this alleged missing crude oil, or they will go to court. Now, normally I support and admire the work SERAP does, but on this one, I think they've gotten it wrong. Because this man, the current president, has signed out of government. He signed out of government. He's just counting down till he returns to Daura to rest. Between now and the 29th of May, even if SERAP starts an action, we are not going to go very far before this administration goes. Now, put that by the side. We've had statements from the GMD of the NNPCL, who has repeatedly indicated or suggested that there's no missing crude oil, that it's a documentation, there's a conflict with documents and it can be resolved. Now, the bigger issue here, and it's very worrying, this was a finding in 2019. Nothing was done about it in 2019. Nothing was done about it in 2020. The excuse will be COVID. 2021, 2022, absolutely nothing done. So literally, in the space of 4 years, nothing was done concerning this allegation in terms of an investigation. And it speaks to the absence of strong public institutions in the country. Now, the EFCC, did you investigate this? Because one of their core functions under the act that sets it up is to investigate crimes that have a national economic significance. Now, 149 million barrels of crude oil going missing is an act that will have a significant and adverse effect on the Nigerian economy. So the EFCC, did you investigate it? We don't know. But it will be safe to say that having not seen any details of it on the pages of newspapers, then they probably haven't started or they haven't gotten very far with the investigations. So the bigger thing is, can the Office of the Auditor General follow up with the relevant government institutions? And let us hope that the incoming administration can look into this matter and determine once and for all whether in fact any crude oil is missing, and if missing, what is the quantum of the crude oil missing, and whoever is culpable or liable should be made to pay the price.
All right, we have just a couple of minutes left. From this day, Nigerians who are wrongfully disconnected by discos would henceforth be entitled to compensation through the issuance of energy credits. And this is a new regulation that's been signed by NERC.
Whoopee. I think this is this is a step in the right direction, and I hope it does get implemented. I do have a personal experience of this. Some years ago, I was staying in a place, and we didn't have a prepaid meter, we had the bill meter, and we had paid our bills, but the guys from the coding company decided to come during a weekday in the afternoon to inspect. And obviously, we had not, both myself and my neighbor who had gone to work, and they were looking, for some reason, they expected to see us at home, or they expected to see evidence of our payment somewhere, according to them. And when they didn't, they decided to disconnect us. But they just hung around till the evening after disconnecting us. So when we got back home and we were looking around and like, what had happened? We saw their truck moving around, and we called them and said, hey, we had paid. These guys insisted that the only way they could reconnect us was if we paid a reconnection fee. We had to pay a reconnection fee to disconnected from power that we was not supposed to have been disconnected in the first place before they reconnected us. And this wasn't a one-off. It was something that they were doing quite often back in the day. Although obviously with time, there are regulations to stop some of these things, but I think there's a step in the right direction. When people know that they will be held accountable for some of these actions, apart from just reporting them, the organizations know they'll be held liable, and they can actually lose some money, either in terms of credits or whatever it is, for this kind of actions. I think the staff and the guys who go around doing some of these things will be a bit more careful. I think also in terms of customer protection, it's a step, obviously a big step in the right direction. I do hope it's something that is enforceable, and I hope that Nigerians are also become knowledgeable about a lot of the recourses and a lot of things that they can actually do to get their rights enforced with the least possible stress, because that's one of the other issues. How do you get your rights enforced if you have to go through long loops and channels? But hopefully this works, and hopefully we can take more steps in the right direction to get better quality of service for everything that we need to get them for. So I think that's good way to end today's review, I hope.
All right, Wilson says, I've always been against the removal of fuel subsidy because of the obvious great impact it will have on the masses. We have a big challenge because successive governments have failed to tackle the problem from the roots. For close to 2 decades, if not more, Nigeria has spent huge amounts of money exporting and then importing these products and finished goods that have been used to fix our refineries. At least 2 of our 4 refineries should have been working by now. God help this country. And Ajayi says, I'm surprised no one is talking about the non-availability of the new Naira note from banks. By the time the December 31st deadline for the final phase sets in, we will go back to panic mode again. All right, Ajayi, you might want to stay tuned to Lagos Talks from 9 a.m. Well, that's all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thanks for listening. Thank you for your messages, and special thanks to our analysts as well, Mr. C and Chibuzor, for joining us.
Thank you.
You stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
Have fun, guys.